The Trinity of Fundamentals, Preface, continued. Canaan could not have done otherwise, seeing as he had just left his studies at the university, an experience associated with vitality, relationships, activities, and the joy of youth. He left his sweet fiancée to become the unknown soldier, undergoing a complete transformation and immersion from head to toe in a milieu at odds with all of the above and man as a social being. We must not rebuke Canaan when he as contrary to what he had been in 1982. He desperately needed 4 years to make the inevitable leap in the course of his development. The characteristics of a revolutionary are like a living being that grows. At the beginning it is stumbling, faltering, and restless, dominated by the I, hesitant, disputatious, and complaining. However, the fire of practice, the experience gained with time, the effect of revolutionary thought, and the collective spirit, given what it encompasses in terms of the recurring power of example, uplifts the I to heightened levels of awareness, determination, and firmness in principle. It is absorbed into the we and acquires the work skills, solid character, and all the provisions needed for the revolutionary enterprise. This is a general essence that is achieved by the pure revolutionary, each in his own way. Revolutionary professionalism takes place when one dedicates themselves with all their personality and all their might to their convictions and principles. When they take a lofty position and become passionate about acquiring real skills and gifts, they are elevated to the category of vanguardism, where they surpass others in competence and become worthy of being labeled trusted guardians. However, professionalism in the Palestinian arena is often falsified and emptied of content to the extent that any full-time worker and employee is called a professional. The contemporary revolution has suffered from the conceit and ruckus of the army of full-timers, creating a heavy burden on the people and their objectives, and giving rise to endless criticisms, not least of which is that in their midst there has grown a stratum of bureaucrats that has spread corruption and ultimately aborted political decision-making and the spirit of resistance of the struggling masses. Canaan is an alternate type that is valiant, brilliant, and free of the dust and corruption of self-interest and parochialism. Canaan's experience, which lasted almost a decade, was not only an olive tree bearing the fruit of struggle and achievement, not only flour kneaded with the yeast of pure suffering. It was also distinguished by the intelligence, insight, preparedness, and original thought which allowed him to avoid the traps laid by the intelligence services and to foil their feverish quest to arrest him for over 9 years. It has to be admitted, however, that the political transformations and the post-Madrid settlement have unsheathed their sword and slain this model of clandestine existence, which has been mercilessly bled. Is it true that this model is no longer desired? This model was, at an earlier stage of history, the highest form of response to the relentless contradictions and a challenge to the tyrannical law. However, in light of the settlement, there has arisen a negotiating authority and a political movement calling for democracy and civil society. All these commitments are pushing to guarantee the calm and gradual development of society in the direction of dependency and tutelage. Consequently, this model is no longer dazzling or an objective demand. However, should economic, political, and cultural globalization fail to freeze the struggle, even if only in the mid and long term, then one could speculate that the national contradiction and the social contradiction will come to a head, and that developments at the regional level could make this model worthy of study, inspiration, and emulation. Generally speaking, this model of resistance was born in the womb of fixed objective circumstances, and was the most noble of the noble. As reading the novel and in between the lines informs us, it was difficult for this model to be born without bringing the party into play. The party, the collective mind, collective guide, collective educator, collective ideology, and the conscience of the people, which appears in the novel as a helping hand whenever Canaan calls on it. It controls his reactions, eliminates his confusion, and supports him whenever he is debilitated by illness. It secures the necessities of life for him and supplies whatever he needs, whether in the form of a letter, a circular directiveness, a visit, or companionship. It is evident that such a party cannot serve such a role unless it possesses a high degree of power to inspire and the ability to convince and resurrect hopes. Canaan does not suffer from hubris. He acknowledges the contributions of his colleagues and carries out the instructions of the party and arms himself with them. Wash your inner self with soap and water and be patient, and it is difficult to forge a secret life without the help of the party. This is totally warranted, considering that belonging to the group and its values, dreams, objectives, and regulations is the foundation of the resistance fighter's vigor. If the party shakes, everything shakes, and if it is confused, the resistance fighter is confused, and his priorities, standards, and point of view on things change too. One can feel how cruel and mean the years in hiding were for Canaan with regards to his constant relocations, for he never settled in one place, and we should remember the small size of the city in which he was hiding, which forced him to be constantly watchful and to utilize his security intuition so as not to run across anyone who could compromise his secrecy. There are other vivid examples, such as the house in which he spent 3 months without being able to turn on the lights at night, the mattress that was stuffed with stones, and the wall with which he grew accustomed to speaking, like the poet Nazir Kabani once said, quote, "I escape from wall to wall," end quote. Although this was not merely metaphorical, it was Canaan's reality, as for years he addressed a deaf and mute wall. He overflowed with thirst and hunger for people. Such a deformed conversation is in fact necessary in a defense mechanism to alleviate the dynamics of misty memories which arise in the womb of loneliness and isolation. In addition, Canaan concluded his mad journey by swallowing papers which had been drenched with kerosene and facing the assault by the soldiers prior to his arrest and investigation. When I met Canaan Wisam in prison a year and a half later, I noticed how emaciated his body and face looked, how sunken his cheeks, and how dull his eyes were, except for a daring gleam which glowed under the force of his willpower and the purity of his revolutionary spirit. When I embraced him, my fingers could feel his ribs, one by one. I was dumbfounded for a moment once the impact of that meeting after 20 years of separation had pervaded my heart. The effect of that happy and tragic meeting remained with me, made me realize the extent of the burdens and suffering made distant by the years. What gave me comfort was his conviction in the validity of his choices, and his reverberating laugh, as though there was nothing disturbing his mood. I must note that during his journey of madness, the face and prayers of his mother appeared daily. Canaan's spirit was splintered by yearning for his mother and would only find satisfaction or heal once they could hug each other. His good, devoted, and patient mother did not falter in igniting determination and energy in her son. She was worried about him whenever she went, worried about her, like spiritual twins. He purified his wounds in her pure and resplendent waters, and found shelter in her shade from the flames of his revolutionary dreams, which burnt his skin and lit an indistinguishable flame in his chest. Al-Naqab-Ansar, 3, Detention Center, February 1990.